Welcome to Shadows at Dusk. Dusk is not the end. It's the doorway between two worlds. A place where stories slip through, quiet, cold, and true. You've entered that space now, and what follows is meant for you. Stay in the shadow. Midnight breathed its first rattle against the glass, a delicate percussion almost lost beneath the wind's tormented symphony. I paid it no mind, attributing the whisper tap to storm-flung shingle against the lighthouse door. Yet, as the hours bled one into the next, the tapping found its voice, swelling from suggestion to insistence. By the third hour past midnight, it was a brutal battery, a hammering that resonated through the stone sinews of my solitary tower. All the while, the tempest clawed at the island, rendering any mortal approach an absurdity. Descending the iron spiral, lamp clutched tight, an icy conviction settled in my gut. Whatever supplicant awaited beyond that shuddering portal wore no human face. My name is Silas Thorne. For 5 years, I have tended the flame of Gannett's Perch Lighthouse. This granite finger, thrust defiantly from a scatter of wave-battered rocks miles off the coast, has sliced the dark for seafaring souls across more than a century. It is a life steeped in solitude, a quietude I had embraced. The metronome of the tides, the austere beauty of isolation, the profound satisfaction in polishing this lens of hope. It had woven itself into my being, or so I believed, until that squall-racked night, late in October's grasp. The day had unfurled with deceptive normalcy. My rituals unfolded, inspecting the great lamp, tending the clockwork heart of the mechanism, scratching weather notations into the log. But as dusk bled across the waves, the heavens bruised ominously. Static spat from the radio, a fractured voice warning of an unforeseen tempest gathering its skirts, winds of gale fury, sheeting rain, the threat of ice hurled from the sky. I made my preparations, securing the world outside my stone shell against the coming violence. By nightfall, the storm unleashed its full throat. Rain drove like needles against the lantern room glass, whipped horizontal by the gale's shriek. Breakers detonated against the island's roots, plumes of spray leaping high enough to kiss the lower casements. Ascending to kindle the beacon, a fierce pride warmed me against the chill. This was the crux of my vigil. On nights carved from such fury, my light might be the sole thread between a vessel and the teeth of the shoals. I settled into the watchroom chair, a kettle whistling its promise of strong coffee, a dog-eared novel open on my knee. The storm provided its own ceaseless orchestra, the wind's pipe organ, the rain's frantic drumming, the timpani crash of waves. A strange comfort resided in its sheer, overwhelming power. And then I heard it, a rap upon the door, a phantom sound, surely, born of wind and weariness. Who could conceivably stand upon my threshold in this maelstrom? This islet was mine alone, the nearest mainland a distant rumor across miles of churning sea. I turned a page, willing the sound away. Minutes crawled by. It came again, 3 distinct, deliberate knocks, barely piercing the storm's clamor. My book fell closed. I strained to listen, every nerve taut. Silence, save for the gale's howl. Then, just as reason began to soothe frayed edges, the knocking returned, louder now, demanding. A rime of cold traced my spine. Impossible, utterly impossible. No craft could have navigated these waters, reached this forsaken stone, and protocol demanded a radio call, a signal I monitored ceaselessly, especially when the weather turned foul. Logic scrabbled for purchase. Debris, perhaps, hurled against the thick oak. A loose shutter somewhere, drumming a frantic rhythm. But the night deepened, and the knocking shed any pretense of accident. It grew relentless, nomadic, sometimes striking the main entrance, then the service door at the rear, occasionally seeming to echo from the high windows far above. By 3 a.m, it had resolved into a ceaseless, rhythmic pounding. A physical tremor felt through the very floorboards. It defied dismissal, defied explanation. Fear warred with a desperate curiosity. Primal instinct shrieked to stay locked within, to ride out the storm and the impossible summons. Yet another deeper current pulled me, the need to see, to comprehend the source of this violation. My hand, trembling slightly, closed around the heavy brass flashlight. Its familiar heft offered scant comfort as I began the winding descent. The pounding intensified with each downward step, the vibrations traveling from the stone through the soles of my boots. My heart hammered a frantic counterpoint against my ribs. My palms slicked the metal casing of the lamp. Reaching the heavy door, my fingers brushed the cold iron of the latch, then recoiled. What if, against all odds, it was someone, a soul cast adrift, clinging to life, somehow fetching up on my desolate shore? Could I condemn them to the storm's mercy? Drawing a ragged breath, I threw the bolts and wrenched the door inward. The wind struck like a physical blow, staggering me, driving brine and rain into my eyes. I raised the flashlight, its beam struggling against the furious dark. Nothing. The narrow stone landing was empty. I swept the light's cone further, across the wave-lashed rocks sloping towards the sea. Only the chaos of wind, water, and stone met my gaze. Relief washed through me, swift and sharp, immediately chased by profound bewilderment. If no one was there, what had made that sound? Then I saw it, poised at the very fringe of the light's reach, down where the sea gnawed at the land, a silhouette, stark and motionless against the tempest's fury. I blinked, convinced my eyes, strained by darkness and fear, were conjuring phantoms. But it remained. Tall, unnaturally slender, clad in something like a long coat that writhed and snapped in the wind. Its face remained obscured, lost in the deeper shadows. Hello? My shout was a frail thing, snatched away by the gale. Are you injured? Do you require aid? The figure offered no movement, no reply. It simply stood, oriented towards the lighthouse, towards me. A fresh wave of profound unease crested within me. Some fundamental law felt violated by its presence, its stillness. I was shifting my weight, preparing to retreat, to bolt the door and raise the alarm via radio, when the figure stirred. It lifted a single arm, the gesture slow, deliberate, pointing directly at my perch. And then, with a dreamlike impossibility, it began to move, gliding forward, not upon the treacherous shore, but across the roiling surface of the black water. I slammed the door, the heavy oak shuddering home, my heart a frantic bird against my ribs. This was madness. A waking nightmare, surely, induced by exhaustion and the storm's hypnotic roar. Yet even through the solid wood, I heard it. Footfalls, measured and heavy, ascending the path towards my sanctuary. And then the knocking resumed, no longer diffuse, but concentrated, focused entirely on the door before me. Slow, ponderous impacts that shook dust motes from the ceiling beams above. I scrambled backward, mind reeling. What abomination was outside? What was its purpose? The pounding escalated, each blow seeming to carry the weight of the ocean itself. I saw the door visibly buckle in its frame. Turning, I fled, taking the spiral stairs 2, 3 at a time, the iron ringing under my desperate flight. I didn't pause until I burst onto the narrow gallery, encircling the lantern room itself. The storm raged here, raw and unfiltered, wind tearing at my clothes, rain stinging my face. I gripped the cold metal railing, forcing myself to look down towards the lighthouse entrance. The door stood agape, and as I watched, transfixed in horror, a figure emerged from the darkness within. Even from this height, its inhumanity was starkly apparent. Its movements possessed a fluid wrongness, its proportions stretched and distorted. It paused at the threshold, then slowly, deliberately, tilted its head upwards, towards me. In the intermittent flashes of lightning that briefly illuminated the scene, I glimpsed pale, water-slicked flesh, eyes that held a dead, phosphorescent glow, and a mouth that stretched impossibly wide, revealing ranks of needle-sharp teeth. It raised one elongated, malformed arm, pointing again. Then it began to climb, not via the internal stairs, but scaling the sheer, rain-lashed stone of the tower's exterior. Its ascent was unnervingly swift, jerky, arachnid-like. I stood rooted, paralyzed by a terror that turned my limbs to lead, watching it scuttle closer. The wind carried fragments of its voice, a sound like grating stones submerged in rushing water, yet chillingly resolving into words. "Keeper," it rasped, the sound seeming to bubble up from the deep. "Your watch is ended." In that instant, clarity pierced the fear. The old salt's tales, the whispered warnings about the true duties of a lighthouse man, dismissed as folklore, flooded back with terrible certainty. We were more than mere guides for ships. We were sentinels, guardians against encroaching horrors from the abyssal depths. Things drawn to our lights, perhaps, as challenges or invitations. And sometimes, it seemed, those things sought to usurp the guardians themselves. As the creature hauled its grotesque form onto the gallery railing, its long limbs a-scrabbling for purchase, I made my choice. I was Silas Thorne, keeper of Gannett's perch, and I would hold my post. Turning abruptly from the approaching horror, I faced the great Fresnel lens, its beam still slicing faithfully through the tempest. With a silent apology to any mariner who might depend on it, I reached for the mechanism and extinguished the light. Plunged into abrupt, profound darkness, the creature faltered, its chittering momentarily silenced, seemingly disoriented. I seized the moment, ducking beneath its grasping limb and hurtling back towards the stairs. I heard it behind me, a skittering, clicking pursuit echoing in the confined space. But this tower was my domain. 5 years had etched every step, every curve into my muscle memory. I reached the ground floor and burst out into the raging storm, not stopping, not daring to look back until my boots hit the sodden shingle of the shore. There I turned. The entity stood silhouetted against the dark bulk of the lighthouse, looming over me, its form seeming to shimmer and writhe in the darkness, less defined, less solid away from the tower. "You are the keeper," it hissed, the sound laced with confusion, perhaps even a thread of fear. I stood my ground, the wind and spray plastering my clothes to my skin, the cold biting deep. "I am," I answered, my voice steadier than I felt. "This is my light, my charge. You hold no claim here." For a long, charged moment, we faced each other, man and monstrosity, caught between the fury of the storm and the vast indifference of the sea. Then, slowly, tentatively, the creature began to withdraw. It shuffled backward, step by hesitant step, until it reached the water's churning edge. With a final, lingering look towards the darkened lighthouse, it submerged, melting into the black waves without a ripple. The instant it vanished, I scrambled back towards the tower. My hands shook violently as I fumbled with the lamp mechanism, restoring the beacon. Its powerful beam speared the darkness once more, a defiant eye reopening against the storm. The remainder of the night I spent in the lantern room, watching the tumultuous sea, scanning for any sign of the thing's return. But there was only the tempest, gradually spending its fury, and finally, the pale, fragile promise of dawn painting the eastern sky. As I sit now, penning this account in the official log, a part of me still struggles to accept the night's events. A fever dream, perhaps? A hallucination born of isolation and the storm's oppressive power? Yet a deeper certainty resides in my bones, cold and hard as the island rock. It was real. There are entities dwelling in the lightless deep that perceive our beacons not as warnings, but as challenges. And as long as towers like Gannett's perch stand, keepers like me will be here to meet them. The storm has passed. A new day demands its familiar routines, clearing storm debris, assessing damage, recording the night's passage in carefully oblique phrases that will satisfy distant superiors without revealing the impossible truth. But as I perform these duties, one eye will forever remain on the restless sea, for I understand now. My purpose extends beyond tending a lamp. I am the keeper of Gannett's perch, and I will be ready should the knocking ever come again. A hush lay heavy upon the woods, muffling the scuff of my boots against a leaf-strewn earth. 15 years I'd walked these paths as Warden Alara Vance, learning the forest's rhythms, its breathing sighs and sudden silences. But this stillness, this was a void, absolute and unnerving. No chatter of squirrels, no avian melodies, not even the drone of unseen insects. Sound itself seemed devoured by the oppressive quietude hanging thick between the ancient trunks of Viridian Timberland National Preserve. Deeper I pushed, drawn towards the forest's core, an unsettling certainty growing. I was walking into an ambush, decades in the making. At 38, life dedicated to Viridian's sprawling wilderness, I imagined I'd witnessed its every mood, the rage of wildfires, the panic of lost souls, the furtive guilt of poachers. Nothing, however, readied me for the discovery awaiting that crystalline autumn dawn. It began subtly, whispers from hikers, tales of peculiar carvings etched into bark. Initially, I waved them off, attributing them to adolescent mischief or the eccentricities of ardent naturalists. Yet the reports persisted, each narrative more disquieting than its predecessor. An investigation was unavoidable. Dawn found me outbound, pack laden for a day's trek. The air held October's familiar chill, mist weaving through the pines like spectral gauze. But as my truck rumbled further along the access road, guided by the coordinates of the latest sighting, a wrongness permeated the scene. The fog clung with unusual tenacity, rendering the trees gaunt, skeletal, and the silence. Dear God, the silence. I had always cherished the wood's tranquility, but this was a vacuum, profoundly alien. Leaving the truck at the trailhead, I stepped onto the path, a route worn familiar by countless patrols, yet today it felt foreign, hostile. Trees loomed, their limbs contorted into grasping claws. 2 miles in, I encountered the first sigil. Gouged into the venerable bark of a colossal redwood, the wound still wept resin. It was a design utterly unknown, an intricate vortex of lines that seemed to writhe and reconfigure under my stare. I captured an image with my phone, then tentatively reached out. The wood beneath my fingertips radiated heat, unnatural warmth, and was that a faint, rhythmic throb? I snatched my hand back, pulse hammering. No prankster did this. This mark pulsed with something not of human origin. Proceeding onward, more symbols materialized at unpredictable points, always scarring the largest, most ancient sentinels of the forest. Each glyph differed, yet all radiated the same watchful malevolence. The deeper my penetration, the more the woods warped. Trees swelled to impossible girths, their trunks twisting into nightmarish contortions. The understory thickened with flora I couldn't identify, leaves shimmering in shades of violent, unnatural violet. A glance at my GPS provoked a frown. It placed me leagues astray, navigating terrain absent from any official map. Impossible. This forest was mapped onto my very bones. Just as doubt urged retreat, I heard it. A low, resonant chanting, emanating from somewhere ahead. The vibration crawled up my spine, a primal fear response, yet compulsion drove me forward. I needed to understand the violation occurring within my sanctuary. I broke through the tree line into a clearing and froze, my senses reeling. Dominating the space stood a colossal stone hinge, a ring of crudely shaped monoliths, each soaring easily 20 feet high, their surfaces crawling with the same disturbing sigils found on the trees. But the activity within the circle arrested my breath, chilling my blood. Figures clad in voluminous robes swayed in a slow, deliberate choreography. Their chant intensified as I observed, the syllables belonging to no earthly tongue. I shrank behind the bole of a massive fir, heart slamming against my ribs. What madness was this? Some esoteric cult? But the construction, how could such a monument rise unnoticed? Even as I watched, mesmerized and horrified, one robed entity detached itself from the circling procession. It glided to the circle's precise center, arms uplifted. The chanting crested, reaching a fevered pitch, and abruptly the air within the monoliths began to distort, shimmering like heat rising from asphalt, yet denser, more tangible. The distortion expanded, coalescing into a wavering portal, perhaps 10 feet across. Through its translucent veil, I glimpsed another place, landscapes alien and wrong, skies of impossible colors, inhabited by forms that defied sanity. A sound must have escaped me, a gasp, a strangled cry. Suddenly, all motion ceased. Every robed head swiveled in unison, fixing upon my hiding place. I fled, faster than I knew possible. I plunged back into the dense woods, branches lashing, the forest floor a treacherous blur. I heard them pursuing, their footfalls uncannily swift. The chant devolved into a guttural snarl that echoed from all directions simultaneously. Time dissolved in that distorted version of my familiar woods. Then, abruptly, I burst from the tree line, stumbling towards my truck. Keys trembled violently in my grasp, a clumsy struggle against the ignition. As I wrenched the vehicle around, tires spitting gravel, a glance in the rearview mirror seared itself into my memory. The forest edge was a wall of deepening shadow, and standing just within it, perfectly still, a line of robed figures watched me escape. The drive back to the ranger station was a blur. My colleague, Ben Carter, took one look at my spectral pallor and sweat-drenched state, wordlessly guiding me to a chair, pressing a mug of potent coffee into my trembling hands. The story spilled out, a frantic cascade of words. Ben listened patiently, his expression carefully neutral. When I finally fell silent, he paused. "Ilara," he began, his tone gentle, paternalistic. "Maybe you need some time away. This job, the pressure builds." "No," I interrupted fiercely. "Ben, I'm not hallucinating. I saw it. Look at my phone. The symbols. I photographed them." My fingers shook as I navigated the screen. The gallery opened. The pictures existed, but they were corrupted, blurred, distorted images showing only indistinct patterns of light and shadow amidst the trees. My stomach plummeted. Ben placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "Get some sleep, Ilara. We'll figure it out tomorrow." But sleep was a forgotten country. Rest would not come, not now, perhaps never again. I carried the terrible knowledge alone. Something profound and horrifying was unfolding in Viridian Timberland, an event utterly beyond human ken, and only I knew. In the ensuing days, attempts to relocate the clearing proved futile. It was as if the forest actively conspired against me. Familiar trails looped back upon themselves. My GPS sputtered nonsensically. Even my trusted compass spun in erratic circles, magnetic north lost to it. Countless hours bled into researching arcane symbology, fringe physics, theories of interdimensional gateways. I consulted experts, archaeologists, physicists, folklorists. Most regarded me with pity or suspicion, a mind frayed by isolation. A select few listened intently, intrigued but ultimately baffled, offering no explanation for the monoliths, the chanting, the shimmering tear in reality. Now, as I commit these words to paper, my gaze drifts inevitably to the window, towards the forest that has been both cradle and career. It appears unchanged, serene, deceptively peaceful, but its placid facade is a lie. I know the truth is festering in its shadowed heart. Sometimes, in the deep stillness of night, I fancy I hear it, the low thrum of chanting borne upon the breeze, a chilling affirmation of the impossible. Somewhere within my woods, a threshold stands open, a gateway to elsewhere. The question haunts me, what has already crossed over? And the truly terrifying thought, what else might be poised to emerge? One conviction solidifies amidst the fear. Inaction is not an option. I cannot unsee, cannot unknow. Whatever cosmic intrusion has taken root in Viridian, whatever ancient or alien horror now resides there, I must confront it. I must find the means to seal that passage. If not me, then who? I am merely a single warden against forces beyond comprehension. Yet I am the sole witness, the only one burdened with this dreadful awareness. Tomorrow, then, back into the woods. I will persist, searching, documenting, striving to grasp the incomprehensible, and perhaps, just perhaps, I can discover how to safeguard not only this forest, but everything beyond its borders from whatever waits on the far side of that luminous wound. It is my duty. I am Warden Vance. I protect this place and its inhabitants, even when the threat transcends their darkest imaginings. The sun bleeds towards the horizon, painting long skeletal shadows across my lawn. Darkness will soon descend, and with it, I know, the distant chanting may resume. But tonight, I am preparing. Tonight, I seek answers. Whatever transpires, whatever truths await discovery, my existence is irrevocably altered. The familiar world has fractured, yet fear yields to resolve. The forest beckons, and I must answer its call. "3 days now, I've inhabited this damp solitude. Silas is the name I carried here, drawn by the persistent whispers surrounding this particular body of water, tales the local archivist relayed with a hesitant gravity, accounts of unsettling apparitions clinging to the shoreline across the decades. My lodging is a stark, single-room cabin abutting the lake, separated from the water's edge by only a slender margin of muck and tumbled stones. Into this space, I conveyed the essentials: a plain wooden table, a canvas folding chair, a crate brimming with notebooks, and a substantial torch. My cot occupies the corner nearest the sole window, offering a nocturnal vigil over the lake's expanse. Moonlight lends it a deceptive smoothness, yet the water itself possesses an unnerving opacity, darker than mere shadows should allow. Ignore the townsfolk's warnings about the post-midnight hours, I resolved. Conviction demanded personal observation, hard data over inherited dread. That first night found me stationed by the glass, eyes fixed on the water's skin. No breeze stirred. The lake lay utterly inert, yet refused the sky's reflection with expected clarity. The moon's image swam there, misshapen, like light fractured through soiled glass. My torch beam sliced the darkness, illuminating only a confined circle before being swallowed whole. Nothing emerged from the depths. As midnight approached, an intrusive chill permeated the cabin, prompting me to activate the small electric heater I'd packed. Sleep claimed me eventually on the narrow cot, yielding only to the gray light of dawn. Nothing untoward. I inscribed brief notes, brewed coffee on a portable burner, consumed a tin of beans. The day passed in a slow circuit of the shore, my boots pressing into the perpetually sodden earth. Strange, given the lack of recent rain. No animal spoor marked the mud, only clusters of small, unidentifiable perforations. My intention solidified. Borrow the neighbor's rowboat, seek the lake's center, peer directly down into its heart. A simple field exercise, I told myself then, a routine assessment. Night 2. I resumed my post at the window, notebook poised upon my lap, torch within easy reach, the heater humming softly against the encroaching cold. Silence pressed in, not empty but dense, heavier than its mere absence should feel. I watched the clock on my phone tick towards the threshold, precisely at 12, the lake's surface subtly transformed. High above, the moon remained a constant luminous disk, bright enough certainly to cast its likeness below, yet the reflection now bore blemishes, shifting geometries that corresponded to nothing celestial. Leaning closer, straining against the pane, I discerned forms coalescing within the ripples, suggestions of faces, perhaps one, perhaps two, stretched and fluid. They didn't drift naturally. They spasmed, pulsed, altering scale with jarring abruptness. I rubbed my eyes, but the apparitions held, sharp as images submerged just beneath the water's tension. Torch in hand, I ventured outside, planting my feet with care on the slick ground. At the water's verge, I directed the beam onto the surface. The light struck. The faces shimmered, distorted, yet persisted. With a low, grating sigh, the rowboat slid from the mud into the water. I stepped aboard, the small craft rocking slightly, and began to row with measured strokes. The air hung still. The boat glided easily. 10 feet from shore, perhaps, the faces materialized again beneath me, drifting pallidly in the torchlight. A reflexive check confirmed they were not reflections of my own features. Their expressions were alien, eyes wide with a strained intensity, mouths articulating silent, slow gapes and closures. I leaned precariously over the gunwale, torch held low, but the water below the immediate surface remained an impenetrable black void. Then a distinct tap resonated from beneath the hull. Not the bump of a curious fish, this felt heavier, a solid, dull thud. I froze. My gaze swept the placid surroundings. Calm water, yet something unseen made contact. Another thud, followed by a slow, sliding sensation along the boat's underside. My hands clenched the oars. Reversing direction, I pulled for the shore, a tremor starting in my arms, my breath catching shallowly in my throat. I focused on steady, quiet movements, resisting the urge to look over the side or betray my mounting panic. The moment the hull scraped reassuringly against the muddy bank, I vaulted out, hauling the boat further onto solid ground. Relief washed over me, sharp and immediate. I stood catching my breath, forcing air through my nose, willing my heartbeat to slow. The torch beam swept back across the water. Stillness. The faces had vanished. A faint dripping sound broke the silence. Looking down, I saw my boots were already sinking slightly into the mire. The air hung thick with a stale, vegetal odor. I dragged the boat higher still, ensuring it wouldn't be reclaimed by the lake, then turned back towards the cabin, the torch beam dancing ahead to pick out the treacherous footing. Pushing open the cabin door, an anomaly registered instantly. Dampness licked the floorboards, despite the securely locked door and shut window. A quick inspection revealed no obvious leaks from the roof or walls. Then I saw them. Footprints, bare ones, roughly my own size, perhaps a fraction broader, glistening wetly. They tracked from near the threshold, across the small room, terminating abruptly beside my cot. A frantic scan confirmed the cabin's emptiness. Beneath the bed, behind the table, inside the shallow closet, nothing. Just me and the pounding in my chest. The prints looked disturbingly fresh, minute beads of water still clinging to their edges. Touching one left cold moisture on my fingertips. Unease tightened its grip. My only defenses were the torch and a modest pocket knife. I stood utterly still, listening. A resonance began, almost infrasonic, a discordant, languid hum vibrating not just in the air, but seemingly within the very walls. It drew me towards the corner opposite my bed. Nothing occupied the space, just bare wood, yet the sound emanated unmistakably from that vicinity. I clicked the torch off, then on again, searching for anomalies revealed by the sudden shift in light. Only the empty wall met my gaze. The humming persisted, morphing into something akin to a lullaby, yet devoid of recognizable melody, its pitch rising and falling unpredictably. Edging closer, the sound intensified, like whispers muffled by a thin partition. Pressing my ear flat against the wood, I caught a faint, dry scraping. I recoiled instinctively. A check confirmed the door remained locked, the window latched. I touched the footprints again. The chill lingered. Perhaps stepping outside would reveal departing tracks. I opened the door, casting the torch beam across the immediate vicinity. The mud near the entrance was undisturbed. No prints circled the cabin. My gaze swept towards the lake, vacant. The humming, however, was distinctly fainter outdoors, confirming its internal source. Retreating inside, I tried to regulate my breathing, the air feeling thick and constricting. Logic offered possibilities: seepage beneath the walls, moisture tracked in on my own boots. But my boots sat on the mat where I'd left them, damp but not soaked. And these prints were unequivocally bare, the toes blunt, the stride shorter than mine. The humming dissolved into a low susurrus, indistinct breaths rather than words. I backed against the front door, needing to keep the entire small space within my field of vision. That's when I saw it, a single droplet of water detaching from the ceiling, landing silently on my table. My torch beam shot upwards, plain wooden planks, unblemished by stain or leak. As I watched, another bead materialized seemingly from nowhere, swelled and fell. Wiping it with my sleeve, released the unmistakable scent of the lake, stagnant and earthy. My stomach clenched. The urge to flee was potent, yet impractical. The nearest inn lay miles distant, unreachable without a vehicle. Taking a ragged breath, I resolved to remain vigilant. Seating myself on the cot, torch clutched tightly, I switched off the heater to better discern any sound. Cold seeped into the room, raising goose flesh, setting my body to shivering. After a time, the whispering ceased. Silence returned, heavy and watchful. Sleep was impossible. My light beam constantly probed the walls, the floor. The footprints slowly evaporated, leaving faint, ghostly outlines. My heart refused to settle. I waited for dawn, slipping into brief, anxious dozes, each time jolted awake by imagined watery murmurs. Morning arrived. Coffee was brewed, a cold ration consumed with little appetite. I meticulously documented the previous night's events. The visages in the water, the inexplicable footprints, the unsettling hum, the precise midnight timing. My resolve hardened. I would face the darkness again tonight, but armed differently. A small mirror positioned by the window, my phone set to record video. If the faces reappeared, I would capture undeniable proof. The day was spent retracing my steps along the shore, clad in boots and a waterproof jacket. The muddy bank yielded nothing new, no birdsong, no fish breaking the water's thick, listless surface. Prodding it with a stick left a thin, slimy film coating the wood. I wiped it clean on a patch of coarse grass. Amongst the shoreline debris, I found rocks weathered into peculiar shapes, but little else. Towards the evening, I encountered the neighbor, the boat's lender. He inquired with a knowing look if I'd witnessed anything unusual. I admitted to troubled sleep. He merely nodded, muttering something about the cabin's transient occupants. My attempts to press him for details were met with a shrug and a hasty retreat, citing chores. Returning before sunset, I meticulously arranged my setup. The phone, secured on its small tripod, faced the window. The mirror rested on the sill, angled to capture the lake's reflection indirectly. Torch and knife lay ready on the table. I secured the door lock, double-checked it, and wedged the chair beneath the knob for good measure. My boots were placed near the cot. A small tin of beans and water constituted dinner. Tension coiled in my shoulders. My hands felt numb with cold, requiring constant rubbing. Midnight. Through the window, I watched the lake. The moon shone brightly. Again, the water's surface held that distorted lunar image. Then, a subtle elongation, the reflection stretching, fragmenting into multiple shapes. I adjusted the camera's focus, ensuring the recording captured the phenomenon. The faces returned, more numerous now, drifting across the reflected moonlight, their eyes seeming to scan, to search. A peculiar tingling vibrated up my arms. A faint, rhythmic tapping sounded against the window pane. A swift scan of the cabin's interior revealed nothing amiss. Stepping outside, I remained close to the threshold, sweeping the torchlight over the lake. The faces were starkly visible now, even without the mirror or camera lens shifting just beneath the surface. From the direction of the rowboat, still beached on the shore, came a faint scratching noise. Crouching, I peered underneath, only a patch of darkened, damp mud. As I straightened, keeping the torch aimed low, something brushed against my ankle. I leaped back, heart hammering, directing the light downwards. Nothing but a small, spreading puddle of water where my foot had been. My trouser leg was damp, a fleeting sensation like a gentle current swirling around my boots, unseen. I scrambled back inside, slamming the door shut. A glance at the phone confirmed it was still recording. My breath came in ragged gasps. Calm felt impossibly distant. The humming began again, this time seemingly localized at the window, the same discordant tune as before. I retreated further, back pressed against the wall, torch beam fixed on the glass. My own reflection stared back, framed by the dimly lit room behind me. No other presence was visible. Extinguishing the torch momentarily plunged the room into profound darkness, my eyes strained, seeking any anomalous glow outside. Nothing. Light restored, the humming abruptly ceased. A check of the floor revealed a fresh set of wet footprints near the wall where the humming had first manifested. They described a small, tight circle before simply vanishing mid-step. Exhaustion warred with hypervigilance. My head throbbed. Dawn felt an eternity away. Checking the phone's recording in the pre-dawn gray confirmed its success. The faces swam eerily on the small screen, faint but undeniable. The playback captured the humming, too, and the slight tremor in my own voice as I narrated observations, evidence acquired. Yet what purpose did it serve? The footprints dried, leaving no physical trace. The humming remained nocturnal. The lake, under the nascent sun, looked merely like water. Departure beckoned, yet the desire for more definitive proof gnawed at me. Water samples, perhaps? A recording made from the boat itself? The thought of venturing back onto that black surface sent a wave of cold dread through my chest, recalling the taps beneath the hull, the phantom touch, the inexplicable footprints materializing within my locked sanctuary. The cabin held a persistent odor of stale water, even with the window thrown open. One more night, I decided. Just one. Rest proved elusive during the day. Lying on the cot, eyes closed, I drifted only fitfully, each time pulled back by faint, illusory sounds of lapping water. By late afternoon, my nerves were frayed raw. Breathing felt shallow, and my hands trembled when I attempted to grip a pen. Another circuit of the lake offered no solace, only the familiar emptiness, dark water, muddy shore, an absence of wildlife or human presence. Upon returning, the ritual repeated: torch, knife, camera, mirror, the door secured. Blocking the window felt safer, but observation was paramount. Midnight arrived. The faces reappeared in the water, sharper tonight, their eyes mobile, mouths opening and closing with silent insistence. A low vibration resonated through the floorboards. I swept the torch across the walls. The humming surged back, louder now, painfully off-key. My fingers tightened around the knife's handle. Stepping towards the source wall, the sound seemed to buzz directly beside my ear. I held the knife defensively before me, slicing only empty air. The sound pulsed through the room, intangible yet invasive. My heart hammered against my ribs, sweat slicked my palms. The door rattled faintly in its frame. Adrenaline surged. I wrenched it open, thrusting the torch beam into the night. Nothing. I slammed it shut again, leaning against it, gasping for air, my shirt clinging damply to my skin. The humming subsided, replaced by a slow, deliberate dripping sound originating from the window. Turning, I saw a single bead of water tracing a path down the inside of the glass. Hesitantly, I touched it. Cold. It carried the pervasive odor of the lake. I snatched my hand back as if burned. The camera, I noted numbly, continued its silent recording. Sinking onto the cot, torch and knife resting heavy in my lap, I settled in to wait for the sun. That sealed passage haunts my recollection still, the first time its threshold loomed before me, uncharted territory. My domain was this husk of a hospital, a repository breathing dust, where I, Elias, curated the ghosts of patient histories on skeletal shelves. I'd believed every shadowed alcove, every echoing ward yielded its secrets to me. A fallacy. One particular night, Deep within the third floor's labyrinthine embrace, a metal door materialized at a hallway's terminus, bolted, rusted fast. A stark placard declared restricted, entry prohibited. A current, sharp and inquisitive, jolted through me. How many nights had I spent immersed in the hospital's chronicles, tracing lives admitted decades past? The other side beckoned. My coat pocket held the familiar weight of a torch, essential armament against the building's failing lumens, where lights sputtered or surrendered entirely. Demolition loomed mere months away. Repairs were a forgotten luxury. My task: shepherd these paper remnants to a modern sanctuary across town before the walls crumbled. That evening, I'd lingered, excavating truths from cardboard crypts in a forgotten supply closet. Returning, my gaze snagged on it, that anomalous portal. Unlike its brethren, its paint flaked away at the seams, the handle obscured beneath strata of neglect. Years, perhaps decades, since a hand had last disturbed its slumber. My fingers closed around the grimy lever. Resistance. A sharp metallic shriek answered my insistence, then yielding. The hinges protested with a grating screech that vibrated in my molars. My beam sliced into the void beyond. A narrow passage revealed itself, walls weeping moisture, paint peeling in long, leprous strips. Dark constellations stained the floor. A chill permeated the stagnant air, thick with the scent of time undisturbed. I crossed the threshold, the heavy door sighing shut behind me. A frantic pulse hammered against my ribs, a counterpoint to the lie I whispered. Just a brief look. The passage constricted, barely shoulder width. Beneath my soles, fragments of plaster or tile, the building's shedskin, crackled. Above, darkness reigned absolute. Only my torch carved a path. Flanking me, 2 chambers gaped, utterly vacant, save for skeletal chairs and violated bed frames stripped bare. Their windows, blinded by rough-hewn planks nailed from within, stared sightlessly. No trace of recent passage disturbed the dust pall. Forgotten, utterly forsaken. At the corridor's blind end waited another door, this one bearing a tarnished number plate. The numerals swam, eroded by time, perhaps 317, possibly 377, indecipherable. Yet a phantom memory surfaced, a file notation, glimpsed once referencing such a room. No hospital schematic I'd meticulously studied acknowledged its existence. Excitement, cold and sharp, pierced through the apprehension. A hidden archive? Records lost to institutional memory? The handle resisted, stiff with disuse. Slowly, I applied pressure. It turned. The door groaned inward, revealing a compact cell, unmistakably clinical. A draft, cool and unexpected, kissed my face. In one corner stood a solitary bed, its metal frame stark and antiquated, supporting a ravaged mattress, thin and stained. Beside it, an IV pole stood sentinel, its tubing dangling empty. Yet, a sound, precise, metronomic, in ping, 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 like fluid striking a surface. Impossible. No bag hung, no reservoir fed the line. My beam swept the floor beneath, bone dry. Not a single telltale glisten. Still, the auditory illusion persisted, each phantom drop echoing in the confined space. Deeper within, relics of forgotten practice lay dormant. A small metal tray hosted antiquated syringes, glass vials clouded with age, a stethoscope seemingly plucked from the mid-century. Dust lay thick as velvet over everything. My light crawled across the walls, revealing the same peeling paint, but here marred by deep gouges, violent scratches as if scored by metal implements. A tightness constricted my chest. My breaths grew shallow, drawing in air heavy with stale, faintly acidic notes. I rested the torch on the tray, its beam unwavering, and tested the bedside drawers. Empty, save for brittle, yellowed forms, their script faded into illegibility. One bore a date obscured by an ancient smudge. Disquiet settled over me, the distinct sensation of trespassing in a place deliberately erased. My watch face glowed, nearly midnight. Prudence dictated retreat, a chance to marshal my thoughts, perhaps return with clearer intent. I retrieved my torch, turned, my hand closed on the doorknob. Inert, I worked it clockwise, counterclockwise, unyielding, solid. Pressing my shoulder flat against the wood, I shoved. It felt buttressed, as if braced from the other side. Don't panic. The thought was a thin shield against rising dread. I aimed a kick at the door's base, a hollow rattle, but it held fast. My pulse leaped, a frantic drum against my ribs. A bead of sweat traced a path down my temple. I swiped it away, tried the handle again. Futile. Silence, then a susurrus behind me, faint, like escaping breath. The wind? Impossible. No window breached the seal. Slowly, deliberately, I pivoted, sweeping the torch beam across the desolate room. From the corner, the bed frame emitted a distinct metallic groan, though I stood yards away. The whisper returned, coalescing now into a low, mournful sigh. A cold wave prickled my skin. My mouth turned to dust. A primal urge surged to hammer the door, to bellow for aid, but reason intervened, a midnight vigil. The lone security guard stationed far off at the main entrance was beyond earshot. Compose yourself. Perhaps the hinges. I fumbled in my pocket, extracting a small folding blade. I set to work on the corroded hinge pins, scraping futilely at the rust. All the while, that maddening drip persisted. Ping, 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 a metronome marking my confinement. Then the whisper again, closer this time, louder, brushing against my very ear like an intimate, chilling exhalation. I recoiled, spinning, the torch beam trembling violently. It danced across the empty bed, catching a dull gleam off the metal. A flicker of movement in the periphery. Shadow play, surely. My heart hammered, palms slick with cold sweat. Minutes bled away, scraping at the intractable hinges. Defeated there, I turned back to the door, braced, and threw my entire weight against it, immovable. The air thickened, pressing down, each breath a labor. The whispers returned, multiplied now, a sibilant chorus just below hearing, a faint, dry hissing. Retreating a step, I charged, shoulder impacting wood with bruising force. Pain flared up my arm, but the door held. A curse ripped from my throat, swallowed by the oppressive silence that followed. Fear coiled tighter in my gut. A profound certainty solidified. I was not alone. Sweat beaded on my brow. My eyes kept darting to the vacant bed, half expecting something. Only the relentless ping, ping, ping of the phantom drip broke the tension. I stalked to the IV pole, tugged the frayed tubing. Empty, dry. Yet the sound endured. My beam interrogated the stained ceiling tiles. No leak apparent. Another whisper slithered past, and simultaneously a definite pressure bloomed between my shoulder blades. A hand firmly pushing. I stumbled, nearly losing my grip on the torch. Whirling, I slashed the light through empty space. Nothing. My throat constricted. Panic warred with the imperative to escape. My legs felt like water. Taking several paces back, I launched myself at the door again. A sickening, grinding protest from the frame, a momentary give, then solid resistance. I staggered back, gasping. Abruptly, the whispers ceased. Silence descended, broken only by my ragged breaths and the infernal drip. I realized I was trembling uncontrollably, the torch beam painting frantic arcs on the walls. Seeking stability, I leaned a hand against the bed's frigid metal frame. Instantly, a second push, harder this time, slammed into my back, stealing my breath and throwing me bodily against the bed. I gasped, scrambling away, sweeping the light wildly. Cornered, trapped. Time lost all meaning. Was it minutes or hours? Each attempt on the door met the same impassive resistance. My pulse throbbed in my ears. My watch face remained stubbornly fixed, 12:30. Yet the digital clock on my phone, glimpsed earlier, had read nearly midnight. Now, still 12:30. The seconds refused to advance. An eternity stretched within these four walls, resolve so hardened into desperation. Break it down. I aimed savage kicks near the handle. The metal warped slightly, but the lock held. Curses echoed, raw and futile, again and again, until my foot throbbed in protest. Then I noticed the drip had altered its cadence. Slower now, each drop resonating unnaturally loud in the stillness. Ping, ping. My nerves frayed. A tremor traced my spine. The air grew leaden. My head pulsed with a dull ache. A childish urge to shut my eyes, to wish it all away, warred with the instinct for survival. One more try, summoning reserves I didn't know I possessed. I drew back and drove my heel into the wood beside the handle. A sharp crack splintered the silence. Shoving with my shoulder, I felt it yield fractionally, then seize again. From the corridor beyond, a distinct sound, the rumble of a metal trolley. "Hey," I yelled, voice cracking with strain. "Help, I'm trapped in here." The rolling sound receded, yet fading into utter silence. I strained my ears. Nothing. Deflated, I retreated, sweeping the floor with my light, searching for any weakness, a loose tile, anything. Only dust motes danced in the beam, catching in my throat, triggering a dry cough. My lungs felt compressed, nausea churned, a knot of fear in my stomach. Focus. Then, distinct amidst the silence, a soft click from the door handle. Barely audible, yet it sliced through the tension. I froze, then spun, torch beam zeroing on the door. Heart hammering, I advanced, reached out, grasped the handle, turned. It yielded so effortlessly. I pulled, the door opened a sliver, then wider, revealing the corridor beyond. Not the Stygian passage of the night, but one bathed in the soft, diffused gray light of dawn, filtering through the boarded apertures. I stumbled out, gulping air that tasted blessedly clean, devoid of the earlier stagnant miasma. Automatically, I glanced at my wrist. The watch hands remained fixed, 12:30, utterly still. Disoriented, I surveyed the corridor. The debris crunched underfoot as before, but the oppressive atmosphere had lifted, leaving only mundane decay. I turned back to the room's entrance. The placard on the door was now utterly blank, wiped clean as if by an invisible hand. My phone, retrieved with trembling fingers, displayed the time, nearly 7 a.m. Hours unaccounted for, swallowed by a mere 30 minutes on my frozen timepiece. I fled the corridor, legs unsteady, casting glances over my shoulder into the now banal shadows. Back in the relative sanctuary of my office, I bolted the door, collapsing into the worn desk chair, breath coming in ragged gasps. My phone showed no missed calls, no inquiries into my absence. I drank deeply from a water bottle, the cool liquid barely soothing the frantic pulse in my throat. Before the rational mind could dismiss it, before the memory faded, I seized pen and paper. I documented everything: the rusted portal, the weeping passage, the desolate room, the phantom drip, the sibilant whispers, the unyielding door, the chilling pressure, its inexplicable release. My hand shook, the script barely legible. The watch lay on the desk, an anachronism frozen at 12:30. I tried winding it, tapping its face, lifeless. Outside, the hospital seemed just itself again, an old structure awaiting its end, punctuated by the distant hum of morning traffic. Soon, the skeleton crew would trickle in. Perhaps fatigue, perhaps stress, perhaps an overactive imagination fueled by the building's morbid history. No, the memory was too visceral. The pressure on my back, the constriction in my chest, the hollow echo of that non-existent drip. I never returned to the third-floor passage. Weeks later, my contract fulfilled, I dispatched the last boxes of curated histories and walked away. No mention was ever made, in any official capacity, of the room beyond the rusted door. It existed on no blueprint, no inventory, an anomaly the hospital itself seemed determined to forget. Yet sometimes, in the quiet solitude of night, the sound returns. Ping, 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 a spectral metronome, counting out the seconds in that lost space. The watch remains unworn, sequestered in a drawer, its hands forever locked at midnight, a tangible testament to the inexplicable. Its genesis resides in the subterranean gloom, unearthed amidst the disarray of moving boxes. Down there, sifting through forgotten relics, my torch beam snagged on something sequestered behind stacks of moth-eaten containers. A silhouette emerged from the dust, a telephone, archaic, bearing a rotary dial and a receiver of formidable weight. It felt dense, glacial to the touch. A swipe of my sleeve cleared a film of grime. Though its cord appeared worryingly frayed, the instrument itself possessed an air of improbable functionality. An object of peculiar interest for the upstairs, I decided. I hefted its surprising bulk to the living room, settling it upon a diminutive end table flanking the sofa, and experimentally nudged the plug into the wall jack. It seated, albeit loosely. That inaugural night, exhaustion claimed me around midnight, a weariness born from wrestling with subterranean clutter. The basement's damp exhalations that seemed to linger in my lungs, a stark contrast to the clearer air above. Sleep, when it came, was a shallow, fragile thing. Then sometime in the pre-dawn stillness, perhaps near 3, a sound pierced the quiet, a ringing. My eyes snapped open. I sat bolt upright, the old phone. Its summons was a sharp, staccato buzz, repeating with unnerving regularity every few seconds. For a beat, I remained motionless in the darkness, uncertain. My bedroom was unlit, the hallway a silent void. Barefoot on the cool wood floor, I padded towards the living room, fumbled for the light switch, bathing the space in sudden glare. Approaching the insistent instrument, I lifted the heavy handset. Silence from my end. I waited, listening intently. What answered was not speech, but breath. Slow, measured, deliberate inhalations and exhalations sighed across the line. No words, no crackle of static, merely the intimate rhythm of respiration, utterly nonsensical. My own attempt at communication emerged as a rough, subdued croak. "Hello?" Only the breathing replied, unwavering. "Who is this?" I pressed, my voice gaining a slight edge. The cadence remained unchanged. After perhaps 15 seconds suspended in this auditory void, I replaced the receiver and glanced at the wall clock. Just past 3 o'clock. The following day became an exercise in determined normalcy. Work, return, dinner, the flickering inanity of television, then bed at a sensible hour. I left the phone undisturbed on its table, curiosity warring with apprehension. Unplug it? The thought occurred, yet a perverse desire to confirm the anomaly held sway. Perhaps faulty wiring, I reasoned, or crossed lines, mundane explanations for the bizarre. That night, punctual as a phantom train, it rang. Same hour, same jarring buzz. I answered, again, the respiration, that same unhurried tempo. This time my voice was louder, firmer. "Hey, who are you?" Nothing. "Talk to me," demanded of the emptiness. Still nothing. I slammed the receiver down, my heart executing a frantic tattoo against my ribs. Lifting it again moments later confirmed my suspicion. The line was utterly dead. No dial tone, no hum, just silence. On the third night, vigilance replaced sleep. I resolved to wait for it, perched on edge in a living room chair, the lights extinguished. My gaze fixed on the phone, an ugly relic in the gloom. Its rotary dial bore the faded ghosts of numbers, worn smooth by countless turns. Nothing overtly sinister marked its appearance. I consciously regulated my own breathing, mimicking a calmness I didn't feel. Near the appointed hour, the silence shattered. I snatched the receiver mid-ring. The breathing was there, a familiar, unsettling presence. But this time, after a few moments, it mutated. A low whisper slithered through the line, unintelligible fragments of sound, like desiccated leaves skittering across pavement. Short, meaningless phrases spoken in hushed tones, almost submerged beneath the ongoing tide of breath. "What do you want?" I challenged the void. The whispering ceased abruptly, supplanted once more by the slow, rhythmic breathing. I hung up, a tightness constricting my chest, my mouth arid as desert sand. Sleep became an impossibility. The impulse to disconnect it surged. Rising from bed, I went to the phone, yanked the cord from the wall jack with a decisive tug. It came free easily. I checked the connection point, unremarkable. Then, carrying the inert object like captured quarry, I descended into the basement's damp chill and deposited it in a far corner. Upstairs, I courted slumber once more. A few fractured hours passed before I jolted awake around 5. Anxiety, a cold knot in my stomach. A compulsion sent me downstairs. Was everything normal? The basement corner where I'd left the phone was empty. A frantic search ensued, behind shelves, inside boxes, the storage room yielding nothing. It was gone. Misplaced it. I tried to convince myself, the lie thin and unconvincing. Retreating upstairs, I scanned the living room. There it sat, on the end table, silent, ominous, returned. The subsequent night it rang. In my bewildered state, having found it inexplicably back in place, I had left it plugged in. Control felt like a rapidly dissolving illusion. Lifting the receiver felt like capitulation. The whispering returned, A torrent of nonsense, disjointed words, fractured sentences devoid of syntax or reason. I attempted to interrupt and to impose order. Stop calling me. Who are you? Leave me alone. My pleas were swallowed by the ceaseless susurrus. After I shouted stop, a subtle shift occurred on the line, a faint sound like furtive footsteps on a wooden floor. Then, distinctly, the creak and click of a door opening, closing. I held my own breath, listening until the silence felt absolute, then hung up. Night after night, the ritual repeated, a nightmarish cadence. The phone would shriek into life at unpredictable, ungodly hours, always late. Each time I answered, the response was either the disembodied breathing or the stream of incoherent whispers. Sometimes, new sounds layered beneath, distant footfalls echoing, the groan of hinges, a muffled, choked sobbing that crawled under my skin. I couldn't pinpoint their origin, only feel their chilling effect. Sleep became a forgotten luxury. Wakefulness stretched thin and brittle. My appetite dwindled. I tried ignoring the calls, letting the abrasive ring drill into the silence. It was relentless. If unanswered, it would cease, only to resume precisely 10 minutes later. I timed it once, a desperate act of empirical observation in the face of madness. 10 minutes on the dot until I yielded. Then, the familiar reward: breath, nonsense, silence. Again, I tried to disconnect it, pulled the cord, coiled it tightly around the phone's base. This time, I secreted it away in a closet, turning the key in the lock, bed, then the ringing. Disbelieving, I rose, flicking on every light switch as I went, banishing shadows. The sound undeniably emanated from the living room. Heart pounding, I unlocked the closet. Empty. The phone rested on the end table, plugged in, mocking my efforts. I tried to compartmentalize the impossibility, simply answering the summons, enduring the gibberish, hanging up. Cold sweat traced patterns down my spine. Destruction became the next desperate strategy. Hammer in hand, I swung. I anticipated the crack of plastic, the splintering of bakelite. Instead, the hammer rebounded with a dull, unsatisfying thud, leaving the surface unmarked. Another blow, harder, nothing. A screwdriver proved useless. The screws refused purchase, immutable. Pliers slipped, unable to gain leverage. The phone remained stubbornly intact, impervious. Frustration curdled into rage. I cursed the inert object, screamed invectives into the handset. The only reply was the steady cadence of breathing, the sibilant cascade of whispers. Disposal seemed the final option. I carried it outside, the cool night air a brief balm. Into the unforgiving embrace of a metal trash can it went, the lid clamped down with finality. Back inside, doors locked, I checked the living room. It sat on an end table, same position, waiting. A crushing weight settled in my chest, my throat constricting. By now, my nights were shattered landscapes. Sleep, when it occurred, was shallow and punctuated by jolts of anticipation. Sometimes, the call waited until 2 or 3. Other times, it ambushed me at 1. Predictability vanished, replaced by grinding uncertainty. The ceaseless sleep deprivation manifested as a throbbing ache behind my eyes, a constant tremor in my hands. My body felt frail, perpetually shaky. Cotton stuffed in my ears proved laughably ineffective. The ring seemed to bypass physical barriers, resonating directly in my skull. Turning up the television volume merely provided a discordant counterpoint to the inevitable summons. Fleeing the house offered no respite. Upon return, the phone would be ringing, patient, insistent. The chilling thought surfaced. Could anyone else hear it? A cautious query to my neighbor yielded a negative, a polite dismissal of late-night disturbances. I didn't ask again. The futility was palpable. One particularly harrowing night, adrift in the 4 a.m. wasteland, after days of fragmented rest, I lifted the receiver with a new resolve to decipher the whispers. Pressing the handset hard against my ear, I strained to parse the low, rapid, broken susurrus. I focused, hunting for a recognizable phrase, a single word anchored in meaning. An arduous task. The voice or voices defied easy categorization. Male, female, perhaps an unsettling amalgam of both, layered into a monotonous drone. Interspersed within the flow were faint gasps, soft, suppressed moans from some unseen background. For a full minute, I simply listened, immersed in the auditory chaos. Then, striving for a steady tone, I asked, "What do you want?" The whispering flowed on, uninterrupted. "Stop calling me. No change. I'm going to unplug you." A fractional pause, a skipped beat in the rhythm, then the whispers resumed, relentless. I slammed the handset down, my heart hammering against my ribs. Pacing the living room, bathed in the sterile glare of every light, I sought refuge in mundane actions. Water straight from the kitchen faucet. An attempt to relocate sleep to the guest room proved futile. The phone's ring permeated walls, seeped through the pillows crushed against my ears. Escape by car offered only temporary delusion. Parked blocks away under the sickly orange glow of a streetlight, seat reclined, I thought I heard it. A faint, muffled ringing, perhaps imagined. Then it grew louder, undeniable inside my own head. Starting the engine, I drove aimlessly, but the sound persisted. Defeated, I returned home. The phone sat silent on its table. Later, inevitably, it rang again. This time, the whispers seemed amplified, accompanied by the distinct sounds of movement, footsteps pacing, doors opening and closing, as if someone were methodically searching the rooms of a house. A glacial chill prickled my arms. I hung up instantly. Further experiments in relocation proved equally useless. Behind the toilet in the bathroom, cold a tile under my feet as I answered the inevitable ring. Same whispers, punctuated by a sudden thump, like something heavy hitting a table. Hanging up, leaving the bathroom, I returned to the living room to find the phone already resettled on its end table. Disconnecting the cord was a temporary measure. It always reconnected itself, an act of quiet defiance. My house became a perpetually illuminated stage. Darkness felt intolerable. Constant light offered a flimsy shield. Sleep was a casualty, sacrificed for vigilance. I sat on the couch, watching the phone, fueling wakefulness with junk food until my stomach soured and my hands trembled when lifting a glass. Irritability became my default state. I took to shouting at the phone, answering before the second ring, bellowing into the mouthpiece. The whispers remained impervious, an indifferent tide washing over my rage. The notion of seeking help, a technician perhaps, surfaced and quickly dissolved. How could I articulate this absurdity? What proof existed? The phone bore no maker's mark, its cord ancient, frayed. The wall jack appeared standard. My own mobile functioned perfectly. This This was other. Sometimes, the whispering would cease momentarily, leaving only a stark intimacy of the breathing. Other times, muffled weeping bled through, the sound of an adult desperately trying to stifle sorrow. The footsteps always remained distant, spectral, varying my tone, pleading, demanding, reasoning, elicited no reaction. Letting the whispers drone on for extended periods changed nothing. They never concluded naturally. Eventually, the ache in my ear from pressing the receiver too hard forced me to hang up. Earplugs were useless. Music blasted through headphones couldn't entirely mask the phantom ring. Answering while the music played made no difference. The whispers continued, existing in their own isolated reality. Attempts to capture the calls on my mobile phone, holding it close to the handset, yielded only recordings of silence, punctuated by my own ragged breathing. Days bled into a gray continuum of exhaustion. Work suffered, health frayed. The phone remained, unbreakable, unmovable, inescapable. Time lost meaning. It was perpetually late, perpetually the hour of the call. My eyes burned, my head throbbed, my limbs felt leaden. The cycle repeated endlessly. The breathing, the whispers, the chilling background noises, the futility of escape, the crushing weight of isolation. It just went on and on. The initial invocation insinuated itself through the pre-dawn stillness, a sibilant whisper that coiled around the spine. Entombed in my sleeping bag, I lay rigid, the frantic percussion of my own heart drowning out the world until that sound returned, a rhythmic, visceral thrumming, seemingly emanating from the very air, from the earth beneath, yet tethered to no discernible source. This was no tranquil night amongst the pines. We had blundered into a presence far more malignant than our city-dulled imaginations could conjure. Merely a retreat, we'd called it, a simple escape. For months, my closest companions, Finn and Clara and I, all of us professionals tethered to urban clamor, nearing the cusp of our 30s, had craved this respite. The allure of untainted air, sweeping panoramas, and celestial canopies proved irresistible. We selected a secluded pocket within the vast national forest, deliberately distant from marked campsites. The trek inward tested our endurance, but gifted us with solitude, a small clearing embraced by sentinel pines, where we erected our temporary haven. That first day unfolded in idyllic sequence. Challenging trails conquered, plunges into a lake of glacial clarity, narratives shared across the flickering tongues of our campfire. But as the second day bled into night, normalcy frayed. The incantation began sometime past midnight. At first, a phantom of my slumbering mind, I thought, yet wakefulness brought the chilling certainty of its reality. It resonated unlike any earthly sound, neither coherent speech nor structured melody, but an unsettling fusion that prickled the skin. With painstaking quiet, I eased open my tense zipper, surveying the moon-drenched clearing. Finn stood already outside, his features stark and pallid in the argent glow. "You hear it too, Leo?" he breathed, eyes wide with disbelief. A mute nod was my only reply, my voice trapped. Clara emerged moments later, instinctively clutching her arms against a sudden phantom chill. "What is that?" Her voice quavered, a fragile thing in the immense silence, between the pulses of sound. It feels everywhere. As if summoned, the chanting intensified, swelling in volume. Distinct voices now, a multitude chanting in eerie lockstep. The syllables, if such they were, belonged to no tongue I recognized. They vibrated deep within my sternum, accelerating my pulse, stealing my breath into shallow gasps. "We should see what it is," Finn declared, ever the vanguard of impulse. "Are you mad?" Clara hissed, her fear palpable. "Every horror story starts like this. People investigate, people die." Her logic resonated, yet a morbid curiosity wrestled with my instinct for self-preservation. Could someone be injured? Was this some esoteric local rite we'd stumbled upon? "Listen," I offered, striving for a composure I didn't possess. "Just a quick look. Anything feels wrong, we're back here packing gone. Agreed?" A tense consensus reached. We armed ourselves with beams of artificial light and sturdy hiking poles, meager defenses against the unknown. We advanced toward the perceived locus of the sound. The nocturnal forest transformed into an alien landscape. Shadows writhed in our flashlight beams, each fractured twig underfoot a gunshot to the nerves. The chanting waxed, a siren song drawing us deeper into the arboreal labyrinth. After perhaps 15 minutes, suspended in taut silence and measured steps, a faint luminescence filtered through the dense weave of trees. Extinguishing our lights, we crept forward, navigating by the moon's spectral guidance. The tableau unveiled in the clearing ahead would etch itself permanently onto the canvas of my nightmares. Figures, swathed in obsidian robes, their visages lost within the cavernous depths of hoods, formed a circle around a great, flat slab of stone. A bonfire nearby cast flickering, demonic light. Upon the stone, centered in their focus, lay a shape disturbingly suggestive of a human form, though details remained obscured by shadow and flame. The incantation reached its zenith, a guttural crescendo that reverberated amongst the ancient trees. One robed figure detached from the circle, lifting a gleaming object skyward. A jolt of cold recognition shot through me, a blade. "We have to leave," I whispered, the urgency of physical pressure in my throat. "Right now." But our retreat was preempted. The chanting ceased, plunging the woods into a silence more terrifying than the sound itself. Then, with unnerving synchronicity, every hooded head swiveled toward our hiding place. "Run!" Finn roared, shattering the last vestiges of stealth. We bolted, crashing blindly through the undergrowth, branches lashing like whips across our faces. Behind us, the sounds of pursuit erupted, heavy footfalls pounding the earth, accompanied by primal cries that scraped against the very definition of human. My lungs burned, muscles screamed, but pure terror was the fuel. In the chaotic darkness, I lost sight of Finn and Clara, my entire being concentrated on the singular goal of escape. A treacherous root snagged my ankle, sending me sprawling, the impact expelling the air from my lungs in a sharp gasp. As I clawed at the dirt, struggling to rise, fingers clamped around my ankle like iron. I kicked backward, a desperate, blind strike connecting with solid resistance. A choked grunt of pain, a momentary loosening of the grip, enough for me to wrench free and scramble away. I ran until the forest blurred, and my body refused further command, collapsing finally behind the bulk of a fallen log. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat I feared would betray my location. I lay there, scarcely daring to breathe, straining for any indication of pursuit. Minutes stretched into an eternity, eventually resolving into an hour. Gradually, the familiar nocturnal symphony of the woods reasserted itself, an owl's query, the furtive rustling of unseen creatures. But of Finn and Clara there was nothing. As the adrenaline ebbed, the stark horror of my predicament solidified. Alone, lost in an unforgiving wilderness, devoid of supplies, disoriented, with the chilling knowledge that somewhere in the encroaching darkness, murderous adherents of some unknown creed might still be searching. I remained hidden until the first tentative fingers of dawn probed the canopy. Every shifting shadow was a potential threat, every woodland sound a jolt to my frayed nerves. Yet immobility was not an option. I had to find civilization, to report the atrocity we had witnessed. It was deep into the afternoon when I stumbled, ragged and near collapse, onto a marked hiking trail. An hour later, salvation arrived in the form of day hikers, their initial curiosity turning to alarm at my disheveled state and fragmented, frantic narrative. They summoned the park rangers. The search for Finn and Clara spanned days, yielding little. Our campsite was discovered intact, undisturbed save for bizarre sigils meticulously carved into the bark of nearby trees. But my friends had vanished without a trace. The clearing of the ritual, when located by the rangers, was barren. No stone altar, no fire pit remnants, nothing to substantiate my account beyond inexplicably flattened vegetation and more of those disquieting symbols etched into the trees. Endless hours were spent with law enforcement, federal agents, repeating the night's events until the words felt hollow. Their skepticism was a tangible thing. Without corroborating witnesses, without physical evidence of the cult, the unspoken conclusion hung in the air. I was either delusional or complicit in my friend's disappearance. 5 years have dissolved since that night. Finn and Clara remain ghosts, officially cataloged as missing, likely victims of wildlife or a fatal misstep in the rugged terrain. Only I carry the weight of the actual truth. Sometimes, in the profound quiet of the late hours, I fancy I hear it again, that insidious chanting carried on the breeze. I've relocated thrice, yet the feeling persists. I coexist now with a constant low-grade dread, the unnerving sensation of being perpetually observed. Worse than the fear, though, is the insidious doubt. Was it real? Did I truly witness such horrors? Or did trauma weave an elaborate tapestry of delusion to shield me from a simpler, yet equally tragic accident? I've immersed myself in arcane lore, researching obscure sects, ancient religions, the occult fringes. Online forums connect me with others, whispering of similar impossible encounters. Slowly, fragmented pieces coalesce into a terrifying mosaic. Whatever held sway in that clearing, whatever claimed Finn and Clara, it was not entirely of this earth. The symbols, the resonance of the chant, the ritual itself, they speak of something ancient, something that slumbers in the shadowed corners of existence, awaiting invocation. I no longer seek solace in nature's embrace. The wilderness is a forbidden territory. Yet occasionally, gazing from my window at trees silhouetted against the night sky, their branches swaying, a chilling question arises. Are they merely trees, or something else? Something patient, watching, anticipating the moment to draw me back into that consuming nightmare. One certainty remains. Realms exist beyond our comprehension, and sometimes ignorance offers profound mercy. For once that veil is pierced, retreat is impossible. The knowledge becomes a haunting, an alteration of the soul, leaving you forever listening, forever wondering when they will return for you. So should you find yourself deep in the woods as darkness reigns and a sound like chanting reaches your ears, do not indulge curiosity. Do not play the hero. Flee. Flee without hesitation, without a backward glance. Because certain sights, once beheld, sear themselves irrevocably upon the mind. And certain rituals, once initiated, possess a momentum all their own. Glass erupted inward, a crystalline explosion painting the cabin floor. A heartbeat later, the air beside my temple hissed, stirred by something deadly fast. In that splintered second, the alpine idol shattered, revealing the grim bedrock of survival beneath. This sanctuary, cradled by peaks, was meant for us. For Ilara, my steadfast wife, for Maya, our perceptive 12-year-old daughter, for young Leo, 8 and brimming with wonder. A promised respite from the city's relentless pulse, a haven woven from pine scent and shared silence, untroubled by digital ghosts. Weeks of anticipation had culminated in this week of secluded bliss. The initial days unfolded like a dream half remembered. We traced paths through emerald forests, surrendered marshmallows to the crackling altar of the fire pit, and let lamplight witness our laughter over worn board games. Peace, profound and unfamiliar, settled over us. Until the fourth night twisted everything awry. We were clearing the remnants of dinner when a dissonant growl tore through the evening symphony, an engine laboring up the secluded track, uninvited, unsettling. Our cabin stood leagues from any thoroughfare. Solitude had been our only neighbor. Ilara's gaze met mine, mirroring a flicker of unease. "Kids, head to your room," I commanded, striving for a calm I didn't feel. "Mom and I need to see who this is." Maya, ever attuned to undercurrents, paused. "Dad, is something wrong?" "Nothing, my love," Ilara murmured, her touch guiding both children toward their door. Likely just the caretaker making rounds. Her voice was a thin veil over anxiety. The moment they vanished, I slid towards the window, peering into the deepening twilight. A scarred pickup truck squatted before our refuge, its headlamps carving cones of harsh light from the gloom. 3 figures disembarked, shapes burdened with long arms. My pulse hammered against my ribs. These were no caretakers, no lost travelers. Their movements, furtive, predatory glances sweeping the surroundings, screamed danger. "Ilara," I whispered, urgency sharpening my tone. "Get Maya and Leo. Hide. Now." Her face, etched with sudden pallor, held a core of resolve. She nodded and slipped away. I moved swiftly, extinguishing the lamps, plunging the main room into shadow. A frail hope perhaps they'd perceive vacancy, move on, futile. Their voices, low yet distinct in the mountain stillness, drifted towards me. "This is it," one grunted. "Gotta be. Miles from nowhere. Nobody to see." "Perfect," another concurred. "Let's hope it's clear." I backed away from the window, thoughts scrambling. Who were they? Fleeing what? And how, dear God, could we escape? Ilara reappeared, the children flanking her, their small faces masks of fear and confusion. I pressed a finger to my lips, then gestured towards the cabin's rear. A small, concealed utility space offered our only refuge, barely adequate but essential. We had just eased the hidden panel shut behind us when the sharp percussion of shattering glass echoed through the cabin. They were inside. Huddled in the suffocating dark, my hand found Ilara's, gripping it tight. Maya encircled Leo, whose small frame trembled despite his admirable silence. We listened, suspended in terror, as heavy footfalls violated the floorboards. Doors creaked open, drawers were wrenched. Our modest belongings sifted through with rough impatience. "Looks occupied," a voice called out. "Clothes, food, but where are the folks?" Ice traced a path down my spine. They knew. Discovery was merely deferred. "Check everywhere," a harder voice commanded. "Can't have gone far. And remember, no loose ends." Ilara choked back a gasp. My grip tightened on her hand. The chilling implication landed with brutal force. These men sought more than shelter. They required silence, absolute and permanent. Footsteps approached, agonizingly slow. A floorboard groaned just beyond our flimsy concealment. Breath held captive, muscles locked. We waited for the inevitable intrusion. Then, inexplicably, the steps retreated. They hadn't found the panel. For an eternity compressed into hours, we remained entombed in that cramped void. We listened as they consumed our provisions, drank our beer, their low conversation sketching the edges of their crime. A bank robbery in a town nearby, this cabin their chosen cooling-off point. As the profound quiet of deep night descended, their movements ceased, replaced by the heavy breathing of sleep. This was it, our sliver of opportunity. If we could navigate past them, reach the car, escape. I leaned close to Ilara, my breath ghosting against her ear. "I'll make noise, a diversion. Take the kids, run for the car. Don't stop for me." Her head shook violently in the darkness, a silent, desperate refusal. I cupped her face, forcing her gaze towards mine in the near blackness. "Please, Ilara, it's the only way." Tears shimmered, unseen but felt. She nodded, a minute heart-wrenching concession. I kissed her, a brief, desperate pressure that embraced Maya and Leo fiercely. "Like the fire drills," I whispered. "Stay low, move fast, don't look back. Promise?" Their wide, terrified eyes held trust. They nodded. Drawing a ragged breath, I eased the hidden panel open. Moonlight, filtered through the windows, painted ghostly shapes across the main room. 2 forms lay sprawled on the couches. The third, presumably, occupied a bedroom. I stole towards the kitchen. my heart a frantic drum against my ribs, convinced its beat alone would betray us. My hand closed around the reassuring weight of a cast iron skillet on the counter. No retreat now. Summoning every ounce of strength, I hurled the skillet. It met the front window pane in a cataclysm of noise, shattering the night's fragile calm. Instantly, shouts erupted. The sleepers jolted awake. Now, I roared, seizing a wooden chair, swinging it wildly at the nearest man struggling upright. In my peripheral vision, a blur of motion, Alara and the children, low and fast, heading for the door. The man I struck crumpled, but the second was already fumbling for a weapon. I lunged, tackling him low. We hit the floor in a tangle of limbs and desperation. He was powerfully built, but fear for my family lent me a savage energy. A solid blow connected, momentarily stunning him. Then, the sharp crack of a firearm, not mine. A cold dread seized my heart. Alara? The children? I renewed my struggle, clawing, punching with primal fury. Suddenly, hands like vices clamped onto me from behind, wrenching me off my opponent. The third man emerged from the bedroom. He slammed me against the wall, stealing my breath in a painful whoosh. Bad move, he snarled, his forearm pressing hard against my throat. Darkness encroached on my vision. This was it. Failure. But through the struggle, a different sound, the desperate roar of our engine catching, tires spitting gravel. Despite the crushing pressure on my windpipe, hope surged. They'd reached the car. My captor cursed, his grip momentarily slackening as he turned towards the sound. It was the only opening I needed. I drove my knee upwards, hard. He gasped, doubling over. Shoving past him, I bolted for the open doorway. Outside, I glimpsed our car fishtailing down the dirt track, Ilara white-knuckled at the wheel. The two men still standing raised their weapons, firing raggedly into the darkness. Their shots went wide. I didn't hesitate, plunging towards the dense embrace of the tree line, praying for its concealment. Shouts and more gunfire erupted behind me. A bullet sang past my ear, a wasp of hot lead so close I felt the air stir. I ran as if pursued by demons, branches lashing my face, unseen roots conspiring to trip me. But I didn't falter. I couldn't. I had to escape, find my way back. For what felt like an age, I crashed through the undergrowth, veering unpredictably, driven by sheer adrenaline and the need to put distance between myself and the cabin. Finally, legs trembling uncontrollably, lungs burning with each ragged inhalation, I collapsed against the rough bark of an ancient pine. I strained my ears, listening intently over the frantic pounding in my chest. Only the nocturnal whispers of the forest answered. I had evaded them, for now. As the adrenaline ebbed, the chilling reality washed over me, alone, lost in an unforgiving wilderness, miles separating me from help, with 3 armed, desperate men potentially still searching, and my family, Ilara, Maya, Leo, a silent prayer formed, let them be safe. I knew Ilara. She would drive straight to the authorities. Help would come. Survival was my only task until then. Dawn painted the sky in bruised hues. Motion was survival. I started walking, directionless but resolute. Staying put was not an option. Every snapped twig, every rustle of unseen life sent jolts of fear through me. But the image of my family, their faces etched with terror and trust, propelled me forward. Mid-afternoon brought the thrumming beat of rotors slicing through the mountain air. Salvation and potential exposure intertwined. Finding a small clearing, I waved my arms frantically, shouting until my throat was raw. A heart-stopping moment of doubt passed as the machine continued its trajectory. Then it banked, circled back, and hovered directly overhead. Relief washed over me in a dizzying wave. As the winch lowered, I saw flashing lights converging on the distant cabin. Over. We had endured. Hours later, bathed in the sterile fluorescence of a hospital waiting room, I held Alara, Maya, and Leo close. The simple fact of their presence, their warmth almost too profound to grasp. We were bruised, utterly spent, haunted by the night's horrors, but we were alive, intact, together. Our perfect mountain escape had descended into nightmare, yet we had navigated its steps. And in that moment, anchored by the fierce love binding us, I understood with absolute clarity. Together, we could face anything. With a tortured groan of rusted gears, the colossal wheel shuddered into motion, the gondola I'd sought refuge in beginning its slow, inexorable ascent. A cold dread bloomed in my chest. I hadn't touched the controls. Someone else haunted the skeletal remains of this amusement park, and they knew precisely where I huddled. My name is Leo. For half a year, I've walked the lonely Nocturnal beat as a security guard at the defunct Dreamland Park. Not a career path paved with glory, but the pay keeps the lights on. Besides, there's a certain spectral charm to a deserted fun fair under the moon. The rides standing silent vigil, paint peeling like sunburnt skin, the walkways echoing only with memory. It feels like trespassing in a land time forgot. Usually, my nights peak with routing teenage ghost hunters. Tonight, however, the script had violently deviated. The shift began typically enough. Dusk bled across the sky as I took over from the daytime sentry, preparing for the familiar solitude, the cycle of patrols and log entries. The initial hours passed in quiet monotony. I paced the perimeter, rattled gates, ensured the padlock on the Hall of Mirrors held fast. It was near midnight, midway through my second circuit, when the unease first crept in. A flicker, peripheral, indistinct. My flashlight beam sliced the darkness where the motion had been, illuminating only the gaunt, still architecture of forgotten joy. I dismissed it, wind perhaps, or a skittering rodent. Old places like this groaned and settled constantly, yet the sensation of being observed lingered, a prickle on the nape of my neck. As I continued my rounds, the feeling intensified, tightening its grip. Shadows deepened, coalescing into watchful shapes. The park's nocturnal symphony of creaks and sighs became a chorus of imminent threats. My pace quickened, my hand instinctively finding the reassuring weight of the taser on my hip. Near the decaying grandeur of the carousel, its painted horses frozen mid-gallop, I heard it, laughter, sharp and unhinged, echoing through the desolate space. I spun, heart hammering against my ribs. Who's there? My voice, intended to be firm, trembled slightly. "This is private property. Identify yourself." Only silence answered, heavy and expectant. Then the laugh again, closer this time, seeming to emanate from the boarded-up concession stands. A cruel game had begun, a predator toying with its prey. My radio hissed static when I tried for backup. My phone displayed a mocking no service. Isolation wrapped around me like a shroud. Against every instinct, screaming for retreat, I moved towards the sound. My flashlight beam jittered, painting erratic circles on the cracked asphalt as I ventured deeper, past derelict game stalls promising prizes long since looted, towards the towering, skeletal frame of the Ferris wheel. What I saw there sent ice through my veins. The control panel gaped open, a tangle of wires exposed like entrails. Someone had been meddling. Before the implication could fully register, footsteps crunched on gravel behind me. I whirled, flashlight stabbing the emptiness. Nothing. But the sounds persisted closer now, seemingly surrounding me. Panic, raw and primal, surged. Acting purely on instinct, I scrambled towards the nearest potential cover, a hanging gondola on the dormant Ferris wheel. I hauled myself in, ducking low, breath catching in ragged gasps, and waited. The footsteps advanced, louder, then abruptly ceased. An eternity seemed to pass, filled only by the frantic drumming in my ears. Then, with a violent lurch, the Ferris wheel groaned awake. Sheer terror seized me as my cage began to lift. Whoever stalked these grounds knew my hiding place. This was a deliberate act, a display of power. Reaching the apex of its rotation, the great wheel ground to a halt, suspending me high above the ghostly landscape, trapped and terrifyingly exposed. From this unwanted perch, I saw them, not one figure, but several, melting in and out of the deep shadows below, fanning out, methodically cutting off any path to freedom. My mind raced, desperate for answers. Who were they? What purpose drove them? Fragments surfaced, recent oddities, missing tools, inexplicable power failures, hushed whispers about certain zones being unsafe. Had it all been converging towards this night? A voice, amplified, distorted, boomed from the darkness below. "Welcome, Leo, to this evening's exclusive presentation. We trust the view meets your approval." I knew that voice. Silas worked the day shift, but the jovial colleague I knew was absent, replaced by this chilling master of ceremonies. "Silas? What the hell is going on?" I yelled down, struggling to mask the fear threatening to choke me. "What is this?" A wave of laughter washed back up. "Oh, Leo." Silas's voice dripped with mock pity. "You truly haven't grasped it, have you? You imagined this was merely a forgotten playground? That your duty was simply to deter vandals and curious kids?" My thoughts spun chaotically. What was he implying? This park, Leo, occupies valuable territory, something certain parties would commit atrocities for. And you, my friend, have been the unwitting watchdog, keeping prying eyes away from our little enterprise. The pieces slammed into place with sickening clarity. The clandestine late-night deliveries, the sections declared structurally unsound and forbidden, Dreamland Park wasn't just abandoned, it was repurposed, a facade for illicit activities. Narcotics? Contraband? The specifics didn't matter. What mattered was the dawning certainty that, having glimpsed behind the curtain, I wasn't intended to see daylight. Now, Silas continued, his tone shifting, hardening. Disposing of you would be simple, efficient, but where's the spectacle in that? We've orchestrated a few diversions for you, Leo. Survive them, demonstrate resourcefulness, and perhaps there's a place for you in our venture. Fail? Well, dilapidated amusement parks are notorious for unfortunate accidents, aren't they? The Ferris wheel gave another protesting groan and began its descent. The moment the gondola was near enough, I launched myself out, legs threatening to buckle on impact. Instantly, the sounds of pursuit erupted, pounding feet and echoing laughter converging on me through the skeletal remains of the park. What followed was a descent into nightmare, the most harrowing hours of my existence. They had transformed the park into a lethal obstacle course. Rides roared unexpectedly to life as I sprinted past, gears grinding, threatening to ensnare or crush. Tripwires sent me sprawling, narrowly avoiding impalement on rusted metal shards. I found myself trapped momentarily in the disorienting reflections of the House of Mirrors, pursued by distorted versions of my hunters, reality and illusion blurring terrifyingly. Yet I possessed an advantage they hadn't factored in: intimacy born of solitude. 6 months of nocturnal patrols had etched every crumbling pathway, every shadowed alcove, every maintenance access tunnel into my muscle memory. I exploited this knowledge relentlessly, doubling back, vanishing into service corridors, using the park's decaying labyrinth against its new masters. As the long night bled towards morning, I sensed their mounting frustration in the escalating savagery of their taunts, the increasing recklessness of their traps. I even managed to turn their malice back on them once, luring a pursuer into a concealed pitfall meant for me. Then finally, as the eastern sky began to pale, painting the clouds with the first faint strokes of dawn, I reached the perimeter fence. Behind me, I could hear them closing the distance, Silas's voice raw with fury, barking commands. Fueled by adrenaline and desperation, I scaled the chain-link barrier, the corroded metal biting into my palms. I tumbled onto the dew-soaked grass outside, just as they slammed against the fence on the other side. Silas's face, a mask of pure rage framed by the wire mesh, was the final image burned into my mind as I sprinted towards the distant ribbon of the highway. I flagged down the first pair of headlights, doubtless appearing deranged, clothes torn, face streaked with grime, eyes wide with terror. The elderly couple within hesitated, understandably wary, but the sheer desperation in my expression must have swayed them. They drove me without question straight to the nearest police station. The aftermath was a maelstrom: detailed statements, federal investigations, a media circus. Dreamland Park, it transpired, had served as a major hub for a sophisticated drug smuggling ring. Silas and his accomplices were apprehended, along with several compromised officials. I was lauded, offered commendations, interviews, even job prospects. But beneath the surface noise, the chilling memory resonated. The proximity of death in that derelict playground, the transformation of mundane routine into a brutal struggle for survival. Now I consult on security systems, designing protocols to prevent the kind of insidious infiltration that festered at Dreamland. Yet the park haunts my sleep. Sometimes I'm back in that gondola, suspended above the abyss the phantom laughter is echoing. I ponder the arbitrary mercy of the sunrise. Had dawn delayed, would I have escaped? One truth remains indelible. I can never view an amusement park with naive eyes again. Behind the manufactured cheer, the vibrant lights, I understand now that genuine horrors can lurk in plain sight, patiently awaiting nightfall for their grim games to commence.